He called me a burden at Thanksgiving. Not to my face, he waited until the room's laughter covered him and then said it like a joke about me eating free food. Everyone heard it. Knives paused above mashed potatoes. My mother stared at her napkin. My stepbrother Cole smirked and refilled his wine like nothing had left his mouth. I sat there and felt the air change. I told myself to let it pass. I told myself families have bad moments. I didn't know that the word burden was the cover story for what he was already doing with my name. The first piece of proof came folded like an invitation. Welcome to your new card. I hadn't applied for a card. I worked the kind of job that teaches you what interest really is. And I only carry one card for emergencies. The envelope carried a logo I recognized from commercials that promise points for being alive. I called the number on the sticker and said calmly that they had the wrong person. The rep thanked me for calling, pulled up the application, and then read me my address. It was my address. She asked me to verify my mother's maiden name. I didn't answer. I asked for the application date, 3 days after Thanksgiving. She told me I could close it, but she also told me there were other applications in progress. I asked where. She read out stores I don't shop at and a bank I avoid. My stomach did that elevator drop it does when you miss a stair. I pulled my credit reports that night, all three. I thought I'd see a mistake I could circle with a pen and fix in a week. What I saw instead was the outline of someone else wearing me. Hard inquiries from places I'd never clicked. A wireless plan I didn't open. A furniture store card approved for a limit I'd never qualify for. There was a new address in the personal information section. I'd never lived at an apartment across town near Cole's gym. And a fraud alert already placed by one bureau, but not by me. I didn't sleep. I typed my name into the FTC's online form until the site gave me an identity theft affidavit number and printed a plan that looked like homework for the next month. The next day, I put a freeze on my file with all three bureaus. It's not a password, it's a padlock. No new lender can pull your report without your say-so. I added fraud alerts too, in case anything slipped. Then I filed a police report. The officer listened like a person listening to a weather forecast. He took my affidavit number, my list of new accounts, and the dates. He told me to keep copies of everything, to send letters by certified mail, and to prepare to be patient. This happens more than you'd think, he said. I told him it shouldn't happen in my kitchen. Mom wanted to help. She brought over old mail she'd been meaning to give me and made tea the way only a mother can, strong enough to stand a spoon in, sweet enough to feel like you're not alone. She asked me if I thought Cole could be involved, then winced at her own question like saying his name in this context would make it true. I told her I didn't know. I didn't want to know. I wanted this to be a stranger with a keyboard in another state. I wanted it to be anything but the person who ate pie on my couch last week and called me a burden in the house I grew up in. 2 days later, a letter from a bank I actually use arrived. We could not set up your new online profile because an account already exists. I called. The security specialist, the kind who talks like they're balancing on a narrow beam, read back the email address associated with the profile. Cole's first name, a number he uses for everything, and the domain he's had since high school. I asked if they had an IP address for the setup. She couldn't give it to me over the phone. I asked whether the email had ever been used on other profiles tied to my accounts. She said she could see attempts. She suggested I come in with my ID so they could lock things down harder. I asked if someone could try to move money with just the profile. Sometimes, she said, honest, and sometimes they make mistakes that cancel the transaction. Either way, you want this over. That afternoon, the first debt collector called. They always open with your name, like they're serving papers. I told him I'd filed an identity theft report and gave him the number. He didn't care. He read a balance, a due date, and a threat. I told him to notate the file, that I dispute the debt, that I am a victim of identity theft, and that any further calls go through writing. He huffed. I hung up and added his company to the folder on my table labeled, People Who Don't Get to Decide Who I Am. I started calling fraud departments like it was my day job. With each card issuer, the script was the same. I am disputing this account. Here is my FTC affidavit number and police report. Here is my proof of identity. Here is the letter you will receive by certified mail. Here are the transactions I didn't make. Here is the timeline. Some believed me after 2 questions and flipped a switch that closed accounts and promised to purge. Some wanted blood. One asked me for a copy of my marriage certificate, which I don't have because I've never been married. I said, "Ma'am, I'm trying to prove I exist." She put me on hold and came back softer. That weekend, I drove past the new address on my credit report. It's not a thing you should do, maybe. It's a thing I did. The building was the color of oatmeal and had a name that tried to be aspirational. There were package lockers by the mailboxes and a management office with blinds that never opened. I sat there long enough to feel stupid. I drove away. 10 minutes later, a text from an unknown number popped up on my phone. "See anything you like?" With it, a photo of the back of my car taken from somewhere above, like my life was a map. I pulled into a grocery store lot and sat until my breath learned how to act normal again. Then I changed my number. The wireless carrier notified me an hour later that someone had tried to port my number to a new SIM to improve your service. That's the phrase thieves use when they want your text message codes. I drove straight to a carrier store and added a port-out pin and a no changes note to my file. The rep looked at me like I had arrived 5 minutes before a fire. When I finally confronted Cole, I did it small. I asked him to meet me at a coffee shop near Mom's house because I wanted witnesses, but not an audience. He arrived late the way confident people do. He ordered his drink with someone else's money. He sat and smiled like the room was his. I slid a pile of papers across the table, my credit report with the address circled, the bank's note about the email, the welcome letter for the card I never opened, a screenshot of an Instagram story where he had posted a photo from a furniture store with a caption that said, "Leveling up, the same day a line of credit in my name bought a deluxe sectional." "That's not proof," he said, and it was almost funny. "You used my name," I said. "You used my email for my bank. You changed my address. You filed for a phone in my name and had it sent to a P.O. box. You bought a couch like it was your signature. You filed an online application for a driver's license replacement on my record." I didn't tell him how I got that last one, that the DMV supervisor had called me back when she saw a duplicate license request for a person whose credit file had been marked with fraud. The supervisor had asked if I had indeed lost my license. I had not. My stepbrother used my name and a fake ID. He leaned back. "You can't prove it was me." "Maybe not with what I have," I said, "but the bank can match the IP on the profile to your apartment's internet, and I can subpoena it in small claims or hand it to a prosecutor if you want the big room. The furniture store has security cameras. The DMV has cameras. The carrier has video on their stores. You're not as invisible as you think." He changed tactics. "We're family," he said, which is what people say when they want you to agree that harm is supposed to be a family discount. "We can fix this without dragging everyone into it." "You started dragging when you used my name," I said, and then I stood up because I didn't want to see his face settle into contempt and make me forget who I am. Family doesn't change the law. A detective called 2 weeks later. He had the IP information from one bank and a copy of the DMV's internal note. Someone had tried to request a duplicate license using my number, photo, and a new address. Cole's building with a signature that didn't match my stored signature. The DMV clerk had paused the request and flagged my record, so any future change would require an in-person visit and 2 forms of ID. The DMV clerk flagged my license and stopped the duplicate. It was the smallest good news, and it felt like a hand on my back when I needed one. The detective asked if I wanted to press charges. I asked if doing so would fix the paper faster. He told me criminal and civil are 2 different roads, both long, but that criminal pressure does something to people who believe paper is a game. He warned me that family cases get messy. I told him it was already messy. He said okay. Meanwhile, I did the kind of work only victims talk about. I sent Section 609 letters to the credit bureaus, the part of the law that says, "Show me exactly what you think is mine," with copies of my ID, police report, and FTC affidavit. I followed with Section 611 disputes when a bureau tried to keep an account because the furnisher verified it using the same bad data that opened it. I wrote a 623 direct dispute to a stubborn creditor who basically told me the account would remain because someone had my number, so it must be mine. I sent them the police report, the FTC affidavit, the DMV flag, and a draft complaint to the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau and the State Attorney General. They found religion. I froze more than my credit. I froze check systems the report banks use for checking accounts. I froze Innovis and LexisNexis, the files some companies check when they want to feel thorough. I froze NCTUE, a database phone and utility companies use. I wasn't going to be surprised by a water bill for an apartment I'd never step into. I put an IRS identity protection pin on my tax file so no one could file a return in my name without a 6-digit number. I created a My Social Security account and added multi-factor authentication after an agent told me someone had tried to open one with my number but failed the identity quiz. I enrolled in USPS Informed Delivery to see photos of mail headed to my address in case a change of address order showed up that I didn't make. I added voice passwords to my bank and carrier accounts so a pleasant voice on a bad phone call couldn't SIM swap me. I opened a P.O. box because my mailbox felt like a crime scene. The day the prosecutor filed the first charges, criminal impersonation and identity theft, I sat on a wooden bench in a room that looked like every courtroom in the country. Pale walls, a flag, a clock that didn't care about anyone's feelings. Cole sat next to his lawyer. He looked smaller than he looks at dinner. Or maybe I looked different standing where witnesses stand. The prosecutor laid out the case in paragraphs. The credit applications, the duplicate license attempt, the IP addresses tying logins to Cole's home service, the furniture store's camera footage showing him holding a fake ID with my name and a photo of himself, slightly bearded. He held it up to the clerk like a hall pass. It was dated. It was clear. It was him. His lawyer tried to make it about our family, my supposed grudge, our history, money I owed him that existed only in his versions of our days. The judge let the lawyer talk exactly long enough and then ended it with a sentence that made me feel human again. This is identity theft, the judge said. Family, roommate, stranger, it doesn't change the statute. She set dates. She warned Cole not to contact me. She told me to keep every piece of paper. A week later, I got a letter from a background check company used by my employer. We were notified of a change of address on your consumer file. Cole's building, again. He wasn't just opening accounts, he was trying to move my shadow. I called HR and told them the truth before the rumor beat me to it. They thanked me and added a note that any future change had to be in person. The idea that someone can tilt your life by editing a database is a lesson I learned, the way people learn to respect ice, too late to stay dry, early enough to avoid the river. I won't pretend the system moved fast. Months are sticky inside a process that feeds on calendars and paper. Some creditors did the right thing quickly. Others asked for a notarized affidavit by mail and then lost it, at which point I walked a copy into a branch and asked the manager to scan it while I watched. When he lost it again, I filed a complaint with regulators and copied the executive office. The account vanished like it had never existed. That's how it often ends, not with an apology, but with a quiet deletion you're supposed to accept as closure. At home, my mother tried to keep the family from split-screening itself into teams. Mark, her husband, wanted to handle it internally, which is what men say when they want to keep the furniture where it's always been. I told him the moment to be internal had passed when his son used a state website to become me. Mom cried in the living room, quiet tears like a person embarrassed by her own plumbing. I held her hand and told her this was not her fault. It's my family, she said. He is too, I said, and that was the awful thing. You can be ours and still be wrong. Cole took a deal before we got to a jury. A misdemeanor on one count, a felony reduced on another, a year of probation, a restitution order, mandatory counseling, community service, and a class on digital identity and financial responsibility. Someone in that office understands that shame doesn't teach anyone who won't listen. Invoices sometimes do. The restitution didn't make me whole. It covered filing fees, postage, a day of lost wages, a slice of the mess I could prove with receipts. It didn't pay for the nights I lay awake rehearsing phone calls. It didn't pay for the way a debt collector's voice lives in your nerves. It didn't pay for the part of me that trusts less easily now. We didn't hug outside the courthouse. He didn't say sorry in a way that reached me. His lawyer did the talking and called it a wake-up call. I told him some people wake up and some hit snooze. He told me to be gracious. I told him I would be careful. 3 weeks later, a small bank I'd never heard of mailed me a welcome packet for a checking account tied to check systems. The freeze should have blocked it. It almost did. A branch manager had overridden the warning because the applicant had all the details. I sent the manager copies of my police report and FTC affidavit and my freeze confirmation. Then I sent the state banking department a note with his name on it. The account was closed by morning. The manager called to apologize using a voice that meant our compliance officer called me first. Slowly, the paper world remembered my face. The bureaus deleted accounts that weren't mine and removed that false address. The bank's fraud team closed the lane Cole had opened and purged the email he used to wriggle into my profile. The furniture store sent me a one-line letter. We have removed the account from your credit file. I framed it jokingly for a week and then took it down. I don't want theft souvenirs on the wall. I changed habits that well-meaning people call paranoid. I call them normal. I check my credit reports monthly even though the updates lag. I keep my social security card in a safe, not a wallet. I shred anything with my name and a barcode. I keep a binder with tabs, affidavit, police report, letters, responses because memory is unreliable when you're tired. I told my doctor's office not to accept changes to my file over the phone. I told my bank never to mail me a replacement card without a text to a number only I hold. I set calendar reminders to renew freezes and alerts whenever the rules change. I added a property recording alert with my county so if anyone files a deed or lien in my name, I get an email before my house appears on someone else's plan. Identity theft teaches you that your name can be picked up like a tool. I decided to keep my toolbox locked. I still think about that Thanksgiving, about the word thrown like a dart with a laugh as a tail. I still hear the way the room sound dipped. The way Mom's fork slowed, the way Mark poured more wine for a person who didn't need more of anything. I still see the face I made. Not anger, not yet, just that flicker of a man who knows the weather's turning. I wish I had said something then. Maybe it would have changed nothing. Maybe it would have changed how long I waited to believe a thing I already knew. People tell you who they are at the table. Believe them before they steal your place. Months later, the detective called to close the loop. The probation started. The restitution began to arrive in quiet envelopes. The DMV flag stayed in place, no duplicate license, no address change, not without me and 2 IDs. The wireless carrier kept the poured-out PIN on my account. The bank kept the code word on file. Cole kept his distance. He gets to do that. I get to do this. Live a life where my name is mine again. Forgiveness, for me, isn't a scene where 2 people hug over a lesson and buy a plant together. Forgiveness is a boundary with a door you keep locked until the person on the porch learns how to knock. I haven't unlocked it. I might one day if his actions line up the way a form asks for lines. I don't owe that to anyone, including the version of me that wants absolution to be a shortcut. Some days I measure progress in small, boring victories. A letter that says deleted, a database that finally spells my name without a cousin address attached, a clerk who stamps my form with a little extra gusto because she remembers the duplicate license attempt, and we both like a story with an ending. These days don't trend. They simply return air to the room. If you want a neat moral, here's mine. I am not your shortcut. Not at a family table, not in a database, not at a counter where a tired clerk has to decide whose story to believe. My name is my work, my days, my dumb jokes, my bills paid on Tuesdays, my photo that matches my face. You don't get to wear it like a coat you didn't buy. And if you want practical steps instead of slogans, here is what I wish someone had handed me on one honest index card the night I opened that first welcome envelope. We're okay now in the way adults measure. Okay, I work, I pay bills, I keep the binder like a weird trophy. My credit looks like my credit again. My driver's license lives in my wallet, and my photo matches my face. The bank texts me when anyone sneezes near my profile. I taught Mom to hang up on account, calls, and dial back using the number on the card. We froze her credit while we ate sandwiches. She cried again, but this time in the way that means thank you. I don't know what Cole says about me now. Maybe he keeps the joke, the burden, because jokes are ladders for men who don't want to admit they were falling. Maybe he tells a new story where he's the victim of a system that overreacted. What I know is simpler. When I walk to my mailbox, I expect envelopes with my name to be about my life. When a clerk asks my name, I expect the screen to agree. When I look in the mirror, I expect to see a face that belongs to one person, not a project. Here is the quiet ending that doesn't make a headline. Identity theft ends in paperwork, not fireworks. You stamp a form, you file a letter, you get a confirmation that isn't pretty enough for social media. You breathe, you make dinner, you sleep. In the morning, you take your name back to work like a lunch, you packed yourself. Protect yourself. Tip, freeze your credit at all three bureaus and the specialty files, check systems, NCTUE, Innovis, LexisNexis. Add a fraud alert and, if you have a police report, upgrade to the extended alert. Put a port out pin on your mobile line and a code word on bank and carrier accounts. Get an IRS IP pin. Create my social security. Enroll in USPS informed delivery. Ask the DMV to flag your license so changes require you in person with ID. Store originals, title, birth certificate, social security card, will, POA, in a bolted home safe or bank box, not in a family drawer. When in doubt, hang up and call back using the number on your card or statement. Your name is yours. Keep it that way. Stay safe.